Transgender Transitions, Sex, Gender Binaries in the Digital Age by K. Siebler. The Rocky Horror Picture Show, 1975. What we see here is a demonstration of queerness. However, at this time, language was not developed to include transgender. Queerness does not necessarily mean waiting to perform as another gender, because sex is not rigidly linked to gender and sexuality. People instead, as we see in this movie, play with gender. However, we are uncomfortable with the idea of non-binary. Transgender characters in this show and real individuals may modify their bodies to the accepted codes for masculine male or feminine female. Definitions can sometimes be dangerous because they do change and are needed to change. Queer is an umbrella term for people who resist the binaries. Intersex refers to people having biological characteristics of both sexes. Intersex people want to name themselves rather than being named by the medical profession. Individual transitions into a gendered category, he or she becomes transsexual. Transsexual refers to an individual who undergoes hormones and surgery in an effort to feel at home in his or her body. This is female to male and male to female. Once an individual transitions for some time, he or she may not identify as trans. He or she feels or she is not accepted as a masculine male or feminine female. Transgender occupies the borderlands between communities and identities. The term was coined during the gay lesbian rights movement of the 1970s and overall rejects categorization. Today, hormones and surgery are used as ways to pass in a heteronormative world. The issue itself stems from the idea that there are no other sorts of representations to counter the hypersexualized, hyper-feminine ideal that pivots on capitalist models of gender-facilitated byproduct consumption. So because of this norm, it's difficult to accept the idea of trans. We need to include a both or neither identity, and this is genderqueer. There is a sense of being more than one gender at a time, or being between genders. This is when a person actively resists gender binary and are less likely to feel the need for hormones and surgery. So they're not trying to pass or conform to a gender norm. We're now going to focus on the trans queer identity online. Online spaces tell viewers that trans means transitioning, and it should mean moving outside the system defining sex and gender. People who are trans may seek online communities for a feeling of safety and anonymity, and to escape violence and find acceptance. What they find, however, is the conditional acceptance. These online communities may only accept them if they have certain gender characteristics. The dominant narrative found in online queer spaces is one of reductive definitions of trans bodies and trans identities. Online communities also read television shows, and one in particular that was criticized and applauded was the L Word. Online fans of popular television shows debate about transgender representations, as was the case for the L Word for Maura as they transitioned into Max. Max is a trans man instead of a butch lesbian due to the use of hormones coded as female without surgery. And so what we see now on online communities is this butch versus female to male border wars. So are you butch or are you trans man? The internet serves more often to reinforce a rigid trans body type. Male to female and female to male are problematic because the incredible variety of embodiment and social enactments that could take place. Ads are used to convince others that they are real men or women. So again, this consumption idea of what it is to be a gendered person. Another phenomenon happening online is this idea that trannies are the new black or simply chicks with dicks, as if black was cool. Online representations and online communities find this as a cool bandwagon, something to support. Male to female transgender representations produce feelings of curiosity and or amusement, so people are looking at this as a spectacle rather than someone's identity in life. Transgender people are seen going through various stages of surgical or hormone transitioning. So that's what it means to be trans, is to transition, rather just to accept a variety or fluid way of presenting and expressing gender. This leads to this idea of trans politics, and what trans people want to be understood as, some that is that they're more than just a gay Barbie. However, there's a lack of portrayals of trans queers on television. What they want to see is this connection between the struggles of transgender people with the civil rights movement. To express yourself in a real way is a civil rights issue. Transgender individuals cast the transgender characters is relatively new, so we don't see real representation of transgender individuals or actors as trans characters, so the real representation is still needed in media spaces. This representation would be revolutionary. Mainstream presence of trans people is revolutionary. However, just because something is representative does not mean that it's about advancement. What we see is that male to female portrayals are simply seen as high drag. The male to female trans queers can easily be read as gay men dressing in drag and playing to the stereotypes both of hyper feminine females and comedic drag performance. What we need to see is a representation away from a femininity that costs money and that body modification is needed to be truly yourself. The body, as we see on television, is presented as a key source of identity. Digital spaces, films, and television shows show to teach trans queers that the current standards are for being trans in this world. That's why media matters. The standards of beauty and the standards of body are hooked into a capitalistic culture of consumption. Without this consumption mandate, would there be these rigid gender standards of how to be trans? Most media theorists argue that the capitalist culture creates a need for body modification or body insecurity. We trust our screens to inform us how we should be, perceiving it as real. The virtual reality of the computer screen is confused with the physical world in which we live in. Yet we believe we are not affected by the cyber text we consume. So be who you are, but you need to spend money to align your body with who you really are. Your natural state is one that's unnatural and needs remediation. This is the problem. That again, this is the only way to be truly trans, as produced and consumed by the digital media.